A lot of men are trying to be better right now, but they're doing it with the same old playbook. Push harder, perform more, and don't try to feel too much. But somehow, you're supposed to get healthier, calmer, more connected, and all of that. So today we are going to talk about what actually makes a man healthy in the modern world. Not just productive, the usual productive, right? Not just good on paper, but steady, emotionally capable, and real. Welcome back to Mind Over Masculinity. I'm Sayan, and my guest today is Louis Brantmeyer, a dating, relating, and sex coach who helps successful professionals create the relationships and intimacy they actually want, not the ones they accidentally tolerate. We're talking about how to be a healthy man in the modern world, and what that even means, and what actually gets in the way. So, welcome everyone to the show. So, Louis, it's a pleasure to have you here with me on this show.
Oh, thank you. An honor to be here.
Likewise, Louis. So before we get into the kind of skills or solutions on what takes to be the healthier version of a man, I think we have to name the confusion first, right? Because I think every guy today is sort of being told a different version of what a healthy masculinity should look like. Um, so I think we need to get back and define what that might mean on a standard viewpoint. And I think a lot of men are trying to grow while chasing a standard that naturally isn't even theirs. So I want to start right there. Since I'm curious, what do you think is the biggest misconception men have about what healthy masculinity is supposed to look like right now?
Oh, it's really that we are taught to not express feeling and to hold back, hide out, to camouflage feeling. So it's, you know, men are told to keep the stiff upper lip, and then they explode later on with trauma and rage because they've been holding in and holding on to so much. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes I think that new mask that you talk about, I think it feels just as heavy as the old one because uh, I think by trying not to show off your emotions too often, it just um, it just puts us in a state where we are not expressive as we should be, maybe. Because underneath all of that performance, the same fears and patterns are still running the show. So, Louis, most men I know aren't trying to be fake. They're just doing what they're taught, right? From day one. That keeps them accepted and sort of respected in the society. So, if you want to zoom on that, what's actually driving those patterns beneath the surface? Where do you think modern men get emotionally stuck the most? Not the surface stuff that I'm talking about, but the deeper pattern that keeps repeating.
So there are a lot of different things we could talk about here.
Hmm.
I think the deepest pattern is it's the nature of the ego to think that there's something wrong with it.
Yeah.
Everyone walks around pretty much thinking they're not good enough, they're not perfect, they're not worthy, they don't belong, they're not significant. And it it is how we differentiate ourselves in the world initially from our parents or
Right.
from the rest of our world when we're young enough to perceive that something's not going as we expected. And then our mind comes in and comes up with an explanation, and that explanation is that there must be something wrong with us. And then that sets up what's known as an oscillating structure, where
Oh.
we are reaching for something to fix the internal problem of the felt brokenness of our own identity. And
Mhm.
so we'll never actually attain the fulfillment or the solution for an internal problem with an external solution. Now, then there's the layer of like trauma where whether it's little t trauma and mommy didn't pay attention to us in a certain way, or big T trauma with like, in my case, for example, my dad beat the crap out of my mom until she was bleeding and dying while pregnant on the floor with my little brother. Like that's taken a lot to wrestle with and deal with as it has come to exist, or the echoes, the debris of that in my psyche. And
Mhm.
so people are taught how to deal with trauma. Trauma we need to approach it with emotional intelligence, fitness, and alchemy. We need to actually feel what's there, feel through it, take responsibility for it. Because even though we didn't do it to ourselves, we get to deal with how it impacts us now. And then, beyond feeling our feelings, healing our feelings, transmuting it into a fuel for our growth, um, there's the domestication of preachers, teachers, family, friends, media, and government promoting ideas and blueprints for how we should be and what we should focus on that are not built for us, they're not built by us, and they're never going to fulfill us. So all of our pursuit in trying to fulfill ourselves through these things, it's bankrupt. And so when we take all three of these together, domestication, trauma, and the nature of the ego, I mean, men just have a very particular spin on this uh, this storm that humankind
Yeah.
rises into. And so when it's a man in particular, I mean, we look at how confused gender roles are today and how escalatingly more confusing they are getting. Uh, I There's a member of my family who used to be uh, a boy, and this has also happened for one of my best friends. His former son is now demanding that everyone refer to them as a woman, and like at the biological level, at the genetic level, it is obvious and evident what someone's nature is.
Yeah.
And that doesn't change just because they've gotten programmed by TikTok or confused by how
Mhm.
much judgment they have on the opposite sex parent, right? And this can
Right.
become very controversial when we start talking about homosexuality versus heterosexuality. And I don't have any judgment on anyone for choosing to be any particular way, but I also don't think it's bad, wrong, or dangerous to claim that we humans have a specific nature. You look at the brains of women, they have more, like genetic women, they have more gray matter connecting the corpus callosum, more brain areas dedicated to processing facial expression, tone of voice, and body language. In fact, Luann Brizendine, in her books, The Male Brain and the Female Brain, localizes through fastidious scientific research the fact that our brains, which come from our genetics, have different features and facets and aspects that don't change just because we decide to get a sex change. They don't change just because we decide to have sex with someone else other than what our genitals are actually available for, like what they're built by evolution to do. There's
Mhm.
I mean, pretty obvious that men can only mate with women biologically. Biological genetic men can only genetically mate and produce fertile offspring with genetic women. And so, if we go against nature and
Mhm.
we start stepping into a culture that promotes confusion against nature, and
Right.
are growing up into a culture like that, and then their fathers are weak-willed or wimpy or not very strong in their expression. Well, yeah, those are very particular types of like people being domestic
Right.
out of their biology. Like,
Yeah, and I believe this would require a whole, I think, different, talk about itself, right? I mean, that's a lot of things that you shared, in just this one single frame, um, Louis. And yeah, because I think once you can actually see the loop, it stops feeling, um, like this mysterious flaw, that you have, that you had, and starts feeling like something you can work with. And by that, I'm talking about, the trauma part, right? So I'm not talking specifically about anything scientific that you shared in the later part, which I think also holds very true. But coming back to what I was saying, I think that's where things really get relatable. When you talk about these patterns that show up, um, more than once. So I'm curious to know that what does this actually look like when good men with good intentions get caught in these kind of patterns?
Could you be more specific?
Yeah. So, say for example, if a man wanted to find his own pattern fast, right? Um, things that keep repeating in his life. There are, I believe, 2 to 3 signals that he should look for in himself. So circling back to what I asked initially is that, so how does this actually look like when people who have good intentions get caught in those kind of patterns? And what are the most common things that you would share, or you could share with someone listening to this right now, that they can use to get out of those day-to-day patterns that are self reoccurring sort of?
Yeah, so the first is a frame, a reframing, where one takes full responsibility for what they're experiencing. So if one chooses to believe and perceive that everything happens for a reason and all things work for good, then your triggers no longer become something that you're a victim of. They become an opportunity for growth, healing, training, transformation, learning about yourself. And
Yeah.
so if we look at whenever we get triggered, and instead of saying codependently, oh, this person did something to me, or this situation made me feel a certain way, which in my training and teaching, codependence is not just something that we see in the DSM-5. It's when, just at a spiritual level, it's believing yourself the delusion or the lie that you're the bitch of the external world, thinking that you need something or someone to be some way in order for you to be okay. And when in fact, we have a distance available between stimulus and response. The stimulus of even pain or nervous system dysregulation in the body, and how we choose to act because of it. So when someone seizes the frame that enables them to begin to play the game of inserting their awareness between stimulus and response, they can intercept the nature of that pain and they can interrogate it. They can get curious about it. Because my view that I carry through into healing work with my clients in relationship and business work is that we're not here to feel happy. We're here to feel full. And whenever we feel fully, whatever we haven't felt yet inside of us, we then get to feel through, and once it's let go of, then we get to feel happier than we've ever felt, because we manifest our reality with our subconscious beliefs. Manifest does not mean to create so much as make
Yeah.
obvious what is already there. And where is that which is already obvious? Inside of us. And we go where we live emotionally, and we use our environment to get us there. So we're manifesting even the experiences of abuse and trauma that happen in the moment, until and unless we take responsibility for what subconscious part of us is choreographing things in a play that might be familiar but dysfunctional. And so it's like radical responsibility and willingness to feel and willingness to do whatever it takes to heal. Those would be my three characteristics.
Wow. Wow, totally. And I think if I have to put this in simple terms, I mean, you could just take yourself out on that nature walk that you promised, and literally tell yourself that you're not feeling like this ever again. I think sometimes it gets as simple like that. And Louis, what really hits me is that most men are actually carrying this emotional cost silently, right? So I believe this starts with awareness first, like you said as well, because they think admitting it makes them weak or complicated. But the truth is, again, it takes way more strength to stay in connection with yourself when things feel messy. And that's where your work gets so interesting to me, because it's not about fixing men, it's about helping them feel regulated enough to show up honestly. Right. So I want to get a little bit practical here. As if someone's listening to this right now wants to become healthier without turning it into another performance scoreboard or whatever we call it. Where do you suggest he starts?
Yeah, so I'll just tell and share the lived practice of my experience.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, when I'm on my game, when I am aware of what's going on in my nervous system, which that can be its
Yeah.
own practice, to notice, am I feeling bad or am I feeling good right now? Am I feeling anger and rage or am I feeling peace, love, joy, and bliss? Some people, they just don't know.
Yeah.
They aren't aware. They are reacting very quickly and sometimes very efficiently to, and by efficient, I mean like it's like click whir, like you put a tape in the VHS, so you press a button to start a YouTube video and it just goes.
All right, but that's just like the response to a stimuli, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
still not awareness, is what you're suggesting.
exactly. So once one has awareness, they can then discern and distinguish dysregulation or disempowerment. And once one has done that, one can take the appropriate steps to debug the code or dance with the experience of disempowerment. So for me, again, when I'm on my game and I notice that I'm disempowered, dysregulated, triggered, hijacked, um, I will walk over to my breakthrough chair and I will plant myself there. Now, I have a life of freedom and abundance and time where I can literally go there pretty much every time of the day or night when I'm feeling this. And it operantly conditions me and also is a matter of commitment for me that I sit in that chair and I will use whatever tools I need to calm down. And then beyond that, it isn't just about venting rage or frustration or like feeling sad. It's about tracking and tracing down the subconscious root of the pain, problem, issue, injury, illness, whatever. And again, we're not here to feel happy. We're here to feel fully. So if I sit there
Oh, I
and
love
I
that.
feel fully, like I feel through whatever's coming up for me, and track down, like here's where it becomes tricky. I mean, like I could teach someone, you simply pet down the front of your chest from the nape of your neck to your um, just below your belly button for 3 minutes with both hands. Like that will reset the vagus nerve and will calm you down, but it won't necessarily deal with the root. So, like, somebody, if they're sitting in that breakthrough chair, whatever their version of that is, with a commitment to not getting up until they've dealt with whatever's there at the deepest level, and has this as a practice that takes them through their daily lives consistently, that anytime they notice they're feeling something other than peace, love, and joy, they realize they're in a lie, a delusion, an illusion, a trauma, a pain that can be debugged or reframed or dealt with. So let's say they're doing that. Well, what what I used to do a lot is because memory is a collage, right? Memory gets reactivated from a new angle as a different series of neural activations anytime we remember it. So even the trauma, I'm not saying we can completely rewrite the memory, but I am saying usually, for example, in paradigm breakthrough therapy, I would take somebody who like they experience smallness and constraint or something that so they're sitting in the equivalent of a breakthrough chair. They just happen to be on the other side of a Zoom call with me as they're doing it. And I ask them, okay, well, is this the first time you've experienced this? And by and large, if it's a pattern, it's not the first time.
Yeah.
And then I ask them, okay, well, when is the very first time that you've ever experienced this that has emotional charge for you, something of this flavor? And they go back as far as they can remember. And so they're traveling back in their psyche into a moment when they had the most and the deepest and the most painful emotional charge around it. And then they go back into the memory, which is often itself painful and difficult in its own kind of challenge. It takes not just courage, but is often very deeply supported by co-regulation, by another nervous system, holding and granting space for them to go into a place in their nervous system where they haven't previously experienced grace, where they're, afraid or triggered or traumatized or whatever. And so they go back into the memory and they distinguish what was it that they made up about themselves or life or other people? What story did they tell? Because what happened was they experienced emotional pain. The
Mm.
story that they told was the belief that then came to constrain, haunt, and prevent the thriving, thrilling aliveness of possibility in them later on. And so if we can get at that story and then, so what did you tell yourself? And then they would say, all right, well, I told myself this, this, and this. And I'd be like, okay. And how long have you used this story as an excuse for being disempowered? See, most people, their stories occur as reality. Their interpretations occur as what's so. But if we can reframe that as, oh, actually, no, that is just a way that you thought you should go in order to have what you needed to have or to feel safe in the face of such extreme pain. And then it's brilliant. Like, this wasn't my technology. This is designed by my mentor, Jonathan England. And I watched him use it hundreds of times before practicing it myself. There's a very intuitive capacity to it at the same time as I'm teaching, see, the science of it, basically, the algorithmic recipe. And, so now they're in the memory. They're internal. They're present to the emotions of the memory. They're present to the meaning they added to the memory and the experience. And I asked them, well, do you want this experience to continue, or would you like to choose a different reality? Because it has to depend on them. We get and we become what we focus on most of the time. It's just our subconscious mind is focusing through frames, at angles that we were too young and too unconscious and too aware to choose consciously. And those frames may protect us from or allow us to titrate the dosage of dealing with certain types of pain that are just too much for the nervous system when we first encounter them. So it's all perfect. It's all, designed in a beautiful way. It works very elegantly. And yet, if someone wants to perform at a higher level, be more fulfilled, be more successful, be more happy, as a man especially, going in, not just naming the emotion, not just naming the story, but actually flipping the script is what becomes necessary. So in order for someone to do that, I ask them, well, who's someone who you absolutely trust, no matter what, to tell you the truth? And by the way, there's a distillation of this, if someone were to go back through and listen, that they could do in themselves. I had a girlfriend, I was astonished and delighted, who took this process and used it in her own mind without even necessarily having to have someone lead her through it or co-regulate her around it, and was producing breakthroughs left and right. So I give what was freely given to me to everyone in your audience, because while it's easier and happens quicker and, can require less effort to have a coach like me lead one through it, one can also produce a lot of great fruits and results through simply doing this process in themselves. So we get to the part,
Yeah, totally.
we get to the part where, someone is inviting someone who they absolutely trust, no matter what, to tell them the truth into the memory. And this person walks up to them and sees them right after the moment of emotional impact and pain, but right before the moment when as they say, chain themselves up to this memory, this interpretation, this story about who they are, about who life is. And then I ask them, the person who's leading the break or being led through the breakthrough, I ask them, well, what does that person see? What does that person say? And often what that person will see or say is about the person undergoing the breakthrough is something very empowering, something that they know about themselves to be true, but which they obscured through the story they tell. And on the other side of that, the realization of that, there's often, a release of emotion, a letting go, relief, something else becomes possible, and they start to feel and see themselves and their lives as new and different. So we planted a new seed in the subconscious. And again, memory being a collage, they have tethered and altered the nature of their memory by adding something in that provided them freedom from the, as it were, stimulus response mechanism. They had a stimulus, which was this painful experience. Then they had a response or a reaction, really, which was the
Yeah.
story. So now we've intervened at that level, and now they have a different possibility when they consider and experience that memory. Now, on the other side of that, the work isn't done, because faith without works is dead. So their faith has shifted. Faith is imagination focused on a desirable outcome. Fear is imagination running wild, right? So faith is like, I trust and know that this will take place. God will provide for me, or this will work out, or I'll eventually marry a great wife, whatever. Fear is your imagination going in all these different directions, like, I don't believe that's possible for me, or I can't trust, or I'm alone, whatever. So we planted a new seed of faith by that definition in their imagination and in their subconscious mind. And how do they feed that faith? Well, through action, through new actions that point back to and reinforce the pattern of their new identity, of who they get to be, who they choose to be. And after they've come out of the experience of basically re-encoding the memory, I ask them, well, what's new and different? What becomes possible for you? What opens up? And what's one action that you can take that would forward who you've become? And then they disclose and they share and they articulate and they verify all of that. And then usually, as a coach, I would hold them accountable to their new identity. It takes 21 days to make a habit, 90 days to make it you. And, it takes real work to have an insight become your identity, to have something cool that happened to you become who you are, which is sort of my little push for the whole industry of coaching. I have definitely stood and even danced on the shoulders of giants who've listened to me as bigger than and more than who I was in the past. And have dignified and honored me with powerful processes, from breakthroughs through this methodology and theta healing to stuff like superconscious recodes, so that it becomes easier and easier for me to take action from and in a way that reinforces the new focus. Because we are what we habitually do, Aristotle said. We are a pattern of recurring neural firing. It's just left to ourselves, that pattern of recurring neural firing is generated by what's familiar, even if it's uncomfortable, by what's something we've survived in the past that our subconscious has tracked. Oh, let's do what's familiar, what we've survived, even if it's limited, even if the capacity is greatly diminished compared to what we might know consciously we should be capable of, or we see around us. So anyway, thanks for listening to that. I just wanted to get the breakthrough process done.
No, totally. And Louis, I mean, thanks for bringing this degree of honesty into the conversation, because the way you I believe articulated that whole thing, I think that has made the whole the point, the crux of this conversation, the essence of healthier masculinity, way more accessible to whoever is listening to this right now. And so honestly, I think every guy listening has been there at some point. You start doing the work, feeling a little more solid, and then something happens and boom, you're right back into that old reaction. It's frustrating. I mean, but it's, again, that's just being human. Nobody rewires overnight. What matters is what you do in that moment now. So that distinction really does matter. So, and my key takeaway, Louis, from this whole conversation, I believe, has been, when somebody is struggling, right? A healthy man isn't the one who is always pushing himself. He's the man, I believe, who can stay present. The whole awareness that we talked about, regulate himself, number two, and choose honesty over himself, over all the ego and avoidance. I think that's what makes all the difference, and that's how you can be the beacon in your own life and move forward from any circumstances. So, thank you again, Luis, for bringing this kind of honesty. And so, before we hit the since we have already passed the minute mark, I would love to ask Luis, where can people find you, follow your work, and go deeper if they want support with relationships and intimacy?
For sure, the best and easiest place for somebody to find more and really a wealth of information and value around this is my TikTok account. It's just Louis Brantmeyer. And I have a regular recurring masterclass on Friday evenings called Awaken Relentless Love in Partnerships, where I lead people through the very processes that I just shared with you and give them insightful conversation and coaching as my gift around all of these things and how to lean into and wake up to healthy masculinity and healthy femininity even. Um, because I've suffered through so much in my life. The best way to learn is through failure. The key is it doesn't have to be yours. It can be mine. Someone can leapfrog through their path of development by harvesting the gold from my own journey.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'll include the details in the show notes, folks. So you can check out the TikTok and also his socials anytime at your own convenience. And with that, we hit today's minute mark on this episode on Mind Over Masculinity. And so if this episode, folks, hit something in you, I don't want you to just nod along and move on. I want you to pick one thing you are willing to practice this week. One moment perhaps where you choose presence over performance. So that's about it. This is Mind Over Masculinity. I am Sayan. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.